so my audio might have majorly died. In the book, A Bunch of Pretty Things I Did Not Buy, the author creates a concept called the Buyarchy of Needs, modeled after Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like Maslow's model, the chart in question forms a pyramid with the most important concepts forming the foundation, with each tier becoming less of a priority as you ascend the pyramid. At least that's the grossly oversimplified explanation of it. In Maslow's model, each larger tier must be met before you can reach the tier above it. In Lazarovic's model, the larger tiers should be tried first before moving on to the smaller ones. Even if you don't intend on reading the book, the Buyarchy of Needs provides us with a great formula for acquiring new wardrobe pieces. So let's go through each tier and discuss how it applies to our wardrobe building habits, starting with the bottom tier, using what we already have. I'm an American, and so is the vast majority of my audience. According to what I'm sure at this point are rather outdated statistics, the average American owns over 140 garments and buys over 60 new items each year. So odds are you most likely already have everything you need to build an outfit. Hands down, the best action you can take is to just learn to use what's already in your wardrobe. Learn how to shop your closet instead of shopping in stores. An exercise you can try is to take out all of your very favorite items out of your wardrobe. The items you already know you love re-wearing over and over again. Try to find 10 to 12 of these garments. Now consider how many outfits you can make with just those pieces. Hopefully, it will probably be more than you already thought. There was a trend going around YouTube for a while called the 10 by 10 challenge, in which individuals would attempt to create 10 outfits using only 10 items. If you feel bored with your wardrobe pieces and have the urge to shop, instead go to your closet and try to pair together items you've never combined before. Obviously, the advice concerning this tier works best if you have already done the work to develop a wardrobe. If you're still in the process of defining your personal style, and you legitimately haven't acquired enough clothing in that style yet, don't fret. We'll get to acquiring new clothes later on, but it is still a good idea to experiment with the clothing that you already have and learn how to coordinate outfits that you like and maybe decide what kind of pieces you feel most drawn to. Use what you have to determine what kinds of outfits you feel best in, what kind of garments feel the most comfortable to you, and that will help you make more informed decisions about what to buy in the future. If you are experimenting with an existing wardrobe and you're finding that you really just can't put together that many outfits with the garments that you have, you might be missing a few essential basics. Essential basics usually refer to items like white t-shirts and blue jeans, but it doesn't only have to mean that. An essential basic for you might be something like a sturdy pair of combat boots, a high quality corset, a versatile petticoat, things of that nature. Consider what items you need to build an outfit. What are the items that create a structure for your outfits? Are the items you have versatile enough to create multiple different coordinates? Or do you just have a collection of statement pieces that don't really go together? On the opposite side of that, is your wardrobe versatile but too simple? Are you able to pair your pieces together, but you're just not satisfied by what you can create? If you have nothing but basics and no statement pieces or accessories, your outfits might not be able to fit your desired aesthetic. Determine what specifically it is, if anything, that your wardrobe lacks, and when you decide to acquire something, focus on filling those gaps, instead of buying anything too similar to what you already own. So let's get into how to acquire new things sustainably. Audio dies, my battery dies, I'm not even halfway through the script. The next tier in the Buyarchy of Needs is borrow, and admittedly, us Americans are not that good at sharing. If you have a special occasion to dress for, you can always borrow something from a friend. If you're going to a costume party or a themed event, and you realistically only need an item for one day, try to ask around in your friend group and see if anyone has anything similar to what you need that you can borrow. Of course, if you do borrow something from somebody, be sure to treat the item well and return it promptly in the same condition that you received it in. And then maybe take your friend out for a coffee or a lunch to thank them for letting you borrow it. If we can all learn to maintain a certain level of courtesy when borrowing things from each other, then maybe we'll all get a little bit more comfortable with the practice. I find that most of the hesitancy that people have around borrowing or lending clothes is the fear that the item will never be returned, or it will be returned in poor condition. So don't be that person and try to have respect for each other's belongings. Similar to borrowing, our next tier on the Buyarchy of Needs is swapping. We all go through periods of time where we want to get rid of items and replace them with new ones. Returning again to our statistics, the average American throws away around 80 pounds of clothing per year, 85% of which will end up in landfills, so when you're ready to discard something, do so in an ethical manner and avoid throwing things away. Most of the items that are donated to thrift stores also end up in landfills, so if you do want to get rid of something, it really is best to try to rehome it first. If you have a good-sized friend group, or if you belong to a local alternative fashion community of some sort, try to attend or organize a swap meet. If you've noticed that your wardrobe is really missing something, this is a great place to try to pick it up, while simultaneously using an ethical means to discard of your own pieces. Buying and selling on apps like Depop and Poshmark can kind of also fit in here, especially if you don't have any sort of local community. It's sort of like a tier in between swapping and thrifting. A Bunch of Pretty Things I Did Not Buy was released in 2014, which predates the Depop craze. So I think if the book were released today and the Buyarchy of Needs was created today, resale apps would either exist in their own tier or they would exist under thrifting. But for the purposes of this video, I'll treat it as sort of like a in-between step that is simultaneously part of both swapping and thrifting. As I've discussed in the past, and as of so many other sustainability YouTubers as well, a lot of the reason why we open up a stuffed closet full of clothing and still come away with the feeling that we have nothing to wear is largely because we simply just have too many things. Not only is choice fatigue a thing, but also we tend to have an overabundance of items that simply just don't coordinate well with each other. For a lot of us, the process of getting rid of the things that we just don't wear can actually make us feel a little bit more inspired with our wardrobes. Just make sure that when you do get rid of items, you're not throwing them away and you're trying to give them to new homes. Also, if you are developing your own personal style, selling the nicer pieces from your old wardrobe on places like Depop and Poshmark can give you a little bit more extra funding for your new wardrobe. I definitely think you should take your unwanted items and try to rehome them locally first, but you probably aren't going to be able to discard everything. And you probably also won't be able to find everything you want locally, and that's where resale apps come in. Sell your clothing for reasonable prices, set that money aside, and then any unsold items can be set aside for upcycling or other DIY projects. So far, I'm only talking about selling on the apps. We can get to buying a little bit later, but when it does come to buying, I think you should prioritize local secondhand shops first before going on to Depop. So next, let's actually talk about thrifting. Do not buy anything new, and that includes new to you finished garments, craft supplies, fabric, or anything for upcycling clothing, unless you already have a plan for how you are going to use it in the near future. I'm not saying you have to meticulously plan a 40-piece capsule wardrobe. That's not what this video is. But when you do buy something new, try to make sure that you can make at least 5 to 10 outfits with that piece using items that are already in your closet. If you are transitioning from one style into a new style, a slow transition will be the least wasteful, and you'll appreciate everything you acquire that much more. When it comes to thrifting locally, try to find your missing basics. Local thrift stores are a great place to find items that you can use as a base layer to either DIY or dress up with things like jewelry jewelry and accessories. Vintage shops are a great place to find old, very over-the-top jewelry. Vintage lingerie like peignoirs, slip dresses, those sorts of things are also very easy to find there. Vintage shops, of course, are going to be more expensive than thrift stores, but they are a good place to find a more curated selection of harder to find pieces. If you are an alternative fashion person, I do recommend trying to get into your local thrift stores in September, especially early September, as soon as the Halloween stock hits the shelves. Thrift stores will save their most outlandish items for Halloween costumes, and this includes a lot of really great vintage pieces. Basically anything that's actually cool and fun is saved for Halloween, so don't pass it up. While you're looking for basics, you might actually get lucky and find a couple really cool statement pieces. I've found corsets, I've found countless vintage pieces, I even once found a Liz Lisa skirt at a thrift store. These instances are few and far between, but they do occasionally happen. Of course, most of the time your thrift store will be absolutely full to the brim with junk. And just because you do find something cool doesn't automatically mean it will be in your size. So you do need to be mentally prepared to walk out empty-handed. So look to local thrift stores first, try to utilize swap meets first, but if you can't find all of the items you need to curate your personal style, then it's time to try buying on secondhand apps and online secondhand marketplaces. Depop is a great place to find vintage pieces and alternative fashion. When it comes to those communities, there's usually a very strong secondhand market for those types of pieces. I know a lot of people hate Depop because there are a ton of sellers that overcharge by astronomical amounts. It is a huge issue on the app and a lot of people have been very vocal about it. I don't necessarily know if it's as bad as it used to be, but it's still definitely happens. I've personally found that when I shop on Depop, I have the most success when I use very specific keywords and also utilize the filter system. I always utilize the size and price filters on every search that I do. Consider what the highest price for an item is that you'd be willing to pay before shipping, and then set your filter to that price. That way, you don't even have to look at the overcharged listings. Then of course use the size filter and set it to a range of sizes that are approximately what you wear. I typically use my exact size plus a couple smaller and a couple larger, but when you do look at a listing, it's best to go off of what your exact measurements are, because I'm sure the vast majority of us are well aware of how variable sizing can be. Using the filters and being very specific with my search terms allows me to zero in on exactly what I'm looking for, in the exact size I want and the exact price I want to pay for it. That is the best way to go when it comes to shopping on Depop, and I've personally found that that's just like the app that suits my needs best. But there are lots of other secondhand apps out there, a lot of other secondhand websites out there, so cast a wide net and see what works best for you and your situation. Obviously, there's also eBay, which is like the original resale marketplace online, but I personally just really don't like the site's layout. That's my personal preference. There's also Poshmark, but one thing that I have major beef with Poshmark for is that they don't suspend inactive accounts in any way. Every time I've ever ordered something on Poshmark, it winds up being automatically refunded a couple weeks later because the seller just didn't log into the app. I also just have a harder time finding things on Poshmark that I like. I find that Poshmark is really more used as a way to sell higher end, brand name secondhand items. And then of course there's ThredUp, which a lot of people in this community like, but I'm personally not as much of a fan of it because again, I just don't tend to find things that I like on there. For Lolita and J Fashions, there's also Lace Market, which is very old and very clunky, but it's still going strong. I also think Closet Child ships internationally now. Of course, it is based in Japan, so if you're from the US like me, it's going to be a very large shipping bill. Facebook Marketplace also exists. It's good for buying and selling locally. Of course, it does require you to use Facebook, but there are so many options when it comes to buying and selling secondhand items online. If you are looking for something very specific from a higher end brand that you know is going to be a larger purchase for you, it's a good idea to look on multiple different resale sites to compare prices. The next tier on the Buyarchy of Needs is make. And making items, DIY, and upcycling has always been a huge staple of so many different alternative fashions. And the only reason I don't put it before thrifting is because I do believe that it's best to try to use secondhand materials as often as possible when you are DIYing and upcycling things. DIY is not inherently sustainable on its own, but it can be incredibly sustainable if you pay attention to where your materials are coming from. There are tons of DIY tutorials, jewelry making tutorials, sewing tutorials online. You can pretty much find everything you could ever want. Do you want a band tee but you can't find one for your favorite musician under $50? Find an old t-shirt that's falling apart, cut it up, and use fabric paint or bleach stenciling or embroidery and make their logo onto a scrap of fabric and then sew it onto a new t-shirt. Congratulations, you have a band shirt. You can even use those patches to cover up graphics on your older shirts that you don't like anymore. You can paint cool designs onto old shoes with leather paint, or use the paint to change the color of them altogether. You can use a pair of jeans that's falling apart to make patches for a jacket. And of course, thrifted bed sheets that are still in decent condition and a sewing machine can make pretty much anything. The world is your oyster and there is a tutorial out there for everything. There's probably several tutorials out there for everything. The final and absolutely teeny tiny tier at the very top of the Buyarchy of Needs is buy, which is specifically referring to the buying of newly made items. By now, we have seen that there are copious alternatives to the purchasing of new items. It should really be seen as a last resort or as a special occasion treat to utilize when you can't find the piece you're looking for anywhere else. I grew up with the food pyramid that was created in 1992, and I know it's not the current one anymore, but you know how sweets and candy was at the very tippy top? You can have a healthy diet and still treat yourself to a brownie now and then. And in the same way, you can have a sustainable wardrobe and still treat yourself to a newly made garment now and then. But that is exactly what it should be, a special treat, not the whole basis of your entire buying strategy. Obviously, you're probably going to want to buy, say, newly produced socks and underwear, but consider how many pairs of those items you actually need to keep in rotation. I personally just don't like the idea of buying, say, tennis shoes or athletic shoes secondhand. That's just not for me. But I also realistically only need one pair. When it comes to non-essentials, and let's face it, the vast majority of fashion consumption is a non-essential. You probably don't have a cool enough job where you can wear a ball gown to work. We can't all be Hot Topic managers. So when it comes to buying newly made non-essential items, try to hold off on that purchase as long as possible. You want to be positive that that item is going to fit into your wardrobe perfectly. If you have the urge to buy something, make do with what you have for as long as possible first. And then when you are absolutely certain you really want that item or something exactly like that item, and it's something really special that will elevate your looks, and it's not something that you can get secondhand or DIY, then and only then save up and treat yourself. If we hold off on buying things, put actual real thought into our purchases, and save up for them and treat shopping like a special occasion, then we'll appreciate the things that we have so much more. As always, when you do buy new, you should try to support small businesses and favor natural materials and sustainable practices whenever you can. But as long as you are actually limiting your purchases, then that in and of itself is a lot more sustainable a form of consumption than buying whatever, whenever. And I get it. I too watched that Parks and Rec episode, the Treat Yourself episode, over and over again.
3 words for you: treat yourself.
And you know what we often forget about that episode is that Treat Yourself Day was one day a year.
It's the best day of the year. The best day of the year!
The philosophy of treat yourself was only meant to be applied to one singular day a year. It was a special treat, literally in the name. So that's all for today. I hope that this was some useful info for all of you. I haven't made a video this long in a hot minute, and I forgot to write the ad breaks into the script, so hopefully they won't be too awkward. Thank you for watching this far if you're still here, and I hope everyone has a good day and that I'll see you all next time. Bye!